And hello, everybody. Welcome again to Management 515. This time, turning from last week's conversation on leadership focused with a little bit of management. This time, transitioning management into creating high performing teams. It's really the goal of management as it has been developed. High performing teams. This was the transition between the scientific method, process oriented productivity, to the Hawthorne effect, which engages employees and is concerned about their satisfaction. If you had the chance to review the video on W. Edward Deming's red bead experiment, you would have seen where Deming makes the case that management often creates rules that inhibits people from achieving their goals, hence from unifying, being productive, and beyond that, high performing. Now, a high performing team is going to have some characteristics in common. For example, they're going to be people focused, right? They're going to make sure that conflict is reduced by clarifying roles and responsibilities, especially early on in the effort. So we'll want this clearly aligned purpose as well. So your organization needs to have a clear alignment from the top through any management level to your organization and then down below you. This alignment is essential, top to bottom. As a leader, you are creating a vision which ensures that alignment. As a manager, you're making sure that everyone understands the vision, purpose, and goals, and as the manager is focused on achieving them. Again, you'll have conflict. That's reduced partly by clarifying roles and responsibilities. The conflict is also reduced as you build high-performing teams by communicating frequently and effectively. And so I used to have a boss that would say, "You've only begun to communicate when you think you are over-communicating. Only then have you really begun to communicate." Interesting concept. Not sure I agree with it in entirety, but it is an interesting concept to consider. Have you communicated enough? Collaboration is important. Empowerment is important to building these high performing teams, but you just can't give it away. You've got to develop them and grow them. And so in the end, to build a high performing team, you must build trust through relationships throughout the time period of your management. And so this slide really just breaks out some of these aspects, right? We need to find goals and a clear plan to achieve them, a plan, a detailed plan. These are essential to great performance, and this is something the manager is going to focus on. Abstract annual goals aren't enough. Sometimes these are things the leader does, these abstract goals or these stretch goals, right? But teams also, from the manager perspective, need shorter range, more compelling, more clear goals that unify the team into this high performing entity, that galvanize them, bring them together into a shared purpose, right? And so you will sequence these to annual results that are those higher level leadership goals that work well. And this is all key to helping the team achieve the goals and want to achieve the goals. If you are making goals for your team, I recommend in the detail of it, make sure they follow the SMART acronym. That is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Every goal for your team at the management level should be smart goals along the way. Sometimes specific, measurable, attainable, really realistic, and time or time bound, right? I also believe that, like leadership, management is positively expressed. and you want to personalize it for each team member. Later, we'll talk about MBTI, or Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, right? These are personality preferences that your team members and you yourself have. So you'll want to make sure you understand individual team members' personality preferences and personalize your approach. This will tie in later as well to motivational theory, which is important for a manager in order to create a high-performing team. And then put it in writing as the manager, right? So, for example, when I was in the Air Force as a commander, I had 2 years to do a job. My first 4 months, I would spend getting to know the people, assessing the unit, identifying what I perceived as gaps, getting to understand the equipment and the current processes. Then I would build a plan and reveal it somewhere between the 4 and 6 month point. And I frankly would have only 18 months left to go in my command. I would build a plan for 24 months out, 2 years, right? Maybe even a 3-year plan, right? Be full of goals. And that would leave me something to work on. They were stretch goals. Sometimes we would accomplish more than I thought we would in the final 18 months. But it also provided something for the next commander to pick up on as they come into the role and assess similarly along the way. So it's kind of a neat process. Now, when we're doing this management approach, there are some things that you should consider applying. One is informality and participation, or the overarching topic is informality and participation. So to be a leader or manager, you need a positive emotional quotient. We'll talk about that next week. And this, like leadership, like management, like technical skills, can be developed. So start by knowing yourself and your team's personality preferences. And I recommend, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. I'm going to put a free online MBTI quiz in the week 2 Moodle so that you can play with it yourself. Take the free quiz, see what your personality preferences are, and get to know the name that your personality preference has. Mine is ENTJ. That is known as the commander. There's a whole history to the psychology behind it. Very interesting. But in getting to know your personality preference, you will begin to see other team members' personality preferences in the 16 options. It's a good tool as you manage them. So anyhow, in this informality and participation, make sure that you're comfortable and relaxed. Be yourself. You cannot lead or manage unless it's you. Now you're developing you, you're growing you all the time, but be yourself. Don't try to be others. You should interact easily. Whether you're talking to blue collar or white collar, treat everyone with dignity, respect, and courtesy. Be interested in them, really interested. This helps to build the relationships that create the high-performing team. Look for signs of boredom, right? Critical thinkers are always assessing. And so a critical thinker is not going to have signs of boredom along the way. I also recommend laughter. I used to tell my teams, let's laugh as long as we're succeeding. Because frankly, let's agree, nothing is funny if we aren't getting our work done. But if we are, let's enjoy it along the way. When you're organizing your team, consider even your seating arrangement, right? Seating arrangements can help facilitate. In the classrooms many of us grew up in were straight lines. Those were really meant to indicate the Industrial Revolution approach that gave us the factory processing line, right? So, but consider the modern world and seating arrangement. Also, consider levels of informality that may encourage participation. Whenever I've worked on a software development project in the military, we always took off rank because it's an agile effort, and rank inhibits the participation required of an agile project. So consider that. I'm not saying these all have to be implemented. We frankly live in a world that doesn't necessarily consider a discipline or consequences, right? There's a balance here, but this is also very important. On the other extreme of this, you may be a toxic handler, right? So we don't want to go to extremes, but we want to create the balance that develops our high performing team. Now, active listening is important as a manager to develop that high performing team. Active listening is a process that actively engages the listener with the speaker. The listener becomes us, right? Deeply involved in what is being said. And it's proven that teams that practice active listening are far more successful than teams that do not. We all know how to listen, and this is why many people prefer face-to-face communications. Let's be honest, active listening includes nonverbals, and 55% of all communication are nonverbals. So strong listening skills are going to help an employee perform better. It's going to show the support of them when they speak, along with giving you and them a better understanding of this shared information. It improves team chemistry. Good listening skills are sometimes often an afterthought when compared to sharing ideas, but they're actually equally important. Poor listening means attention is gonna wander. You interrupt the group. We miss the real point. We let emotions interfere with judgment, as opposed to active listening where we're paying attention to nonverbals. We're using cues and invitations to encourage responses. We're clarifying what's being said by asking open-ended questions or summarizing or paraphrasing what is heard along the way. Now, active listening. This is just another summary of the why and when. So a good time to kind of pause the slide and consider it, right? Summarize some of these features of active listening, like neutral and non-judgmental, being patient, right? Periods of long silence that just aren't filled, right? Look at verbals and nonverbals, which are signs: smiling, eye contact, leaning in, mirroring activities. Ask questions, reflect back on what is said, summarize, etc. Now, part of good leading teams as a manager is in this processes versus people. So really leading teams as a manager, the whole organization of your efforts of managing them means that people fall into processes and people along the way. I will say, last week I offered 10 leadership styles in 5 minutes. So go back to Moodle week 1 for that link. I also recommend going back and reviewing some of the situational leadership style, right? Because all of these are critical to building these high-performing teams. Later, we're going to add tools to your management toolkit that build high-performing teams. I touched on them at the beginning of this conversation this week. One is trust. We have to develop trust. Later, I'm going to give you a formula to develop trust with your teams. I'll just tell you right now, it's trust equals ability plus benevolence plus integrity. And we're going to talk about that in detail in the future. We're also going to talk about Tuckman's stages of team performance, right? Because as you inherit a team, those Tuckman stages are forming, storming, norming, performing, which is high performing, and adjourning when the team breaks up. So there is a process the team transitions through. You as a manager need to understand that, and we'll talk about tools to help them through it. But that's in a future lesson. This was good for this week, and I look forward to our online time.